Welcome to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, your guide to future tech trends and innovation in a language you understand. Now, over to your host, Neil Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. I'm going to ruin a little mystique around this podcast today and tell you that although it may feel like just another day, where you're on the way to work or to the gym and you're playing this podcast, and here I am talking to you, just like I would on any other morning. But actually, I'm away on holiday on a mini father and son adventure where we're going to be trying to put the tech down, going off the grid and trying to navigate whitewater rafting, zip lines, swimming in waterfalls, Game of Thrones tours, sea kayaking, swimming in blue caves and mountain biking without trying to make a fool of myself in front of my boy. But I don't want you to worry because I've ensured that you can still get your daily tech fix right here on the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Today we have Alex Wright on the show, who is the head of insight at Blis. And Blis is the global leader in advanced location data technology. And their proprietary platform provides businesses with accurate location data and in-depth behavioural insights to serve digital content to audiences that are on the move. So he is tasked with interpreting Blis's unique dataset and applying it to help address client challenges. Now, having more than a decade working in research and insight roles across a diverse range of media agencies, owners and publishers, Alex uses this perspective to understand the role of mobile location data and what it plays in marketing communications and media planning. Analytics and philosophy are the principal disciplines that underpin his work, ensuring that data is always viewed through a human lens, or to ensure that objectively observed patterns can be applied to real-world behaviour. So he has little interest in vanity puff piece research projects and believes that insight is nothing without implication. Sounds like my kind of guy, so let's get him on. So buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears all the way to London so we can speak with Alex Wright, Head of Insights at Blis. So massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little more about who you are and what you do?
Hi Neil, yeah, thanks for having me on. My name's Alex Wright. I'm the Head of Insight at Blis. Blis are a company that specialise in location data. Blis have been in the business of location since its conception, really. So Greg Isbister, our CEO, legend has it, built the first piece of tech in his mum's basement, I suppose, as every great tech entrepreneur, pioneer does. Yeah, that's the backstory that comes with the territory, and has grown it via becoming a DSP about 8 years ago, I believe. So the focus has always been on media, but the last 2 or 3 years, I suppose, coinciding with me joining the business, seen not a change in direction, but an addition of analytics to our armory as well.
And one of the things I love to do with every guest that comes on here is, yes, we're going to talk about the technology and the company and everything, but also find a little bit more about yourself and your backstory. And it's fair to say you have been on a fantastic journey, having worked in insight roles along quite a diverse range of media owners in radio, print and cinema, to name but a few. But what are the biggest lessons that you've learned along the way and how it's allowed you to shape your current role?
I mean, yeah, you say it's a journey. It's no Love Island, but no, it's been great. I joined the industry 2006. It was a radio company who then got taken over and became a bigger radio company. And it wasn't until I think I left that business and joined what even at that time was perceived to be a bit of a dinosaur's business in print that it became more apparent that it's not about partisan rhetoric that comes with a media sales pitch. Particularly not from an insight or a data or an audience perspective. It's more about what role are you fulfilling within that ecosystem. And I know the word ecosystem gets bandied around quite freely, but I use it quite deliberately here, in that everything that contributes to that, well, let's call it a pseudo-civilization in media, but everything has to be independent. And I think any preconceptions you might have that by operating in a silo, that puts you in a position of advantage, your influence is going to be diminished by pursuing that route.
And a great quote I read from you online was, it really stood out for me when I was researching you, was you believe that tech innovation is evolutionary, not revolutionary. I mean, can you tell me a little bit more about that quote and how you got there?
Probably a theme that will come out throughout our chat, actually, is that I'm an unapologetic fence sitter. I think like the curse of the binary and the fascination with polarising the debate is a bit of a dangerous path to go down. I think, so to actually answer your question, viewed through a long-term lens, if we're looking retrospectively, what we are doing at the moment will be seen as revolutionary. You know, if we go back 10 years, the smartphones were barely a thing, but they've been the biggest single disruptor in the industry. I think, well, in the industry, if we talk about the industry being media, but also in people's behaviour, arguably. So while we're on the inside, it probably feels evolutionary. If you're looking at it from the outside, these are big shifts. I mean, even at the moment, I think I read earlier this week, a couple of banks are saying that if you want to complete online transactions, they have to send you a code to your mobile to verify it. And if people don't have a device, or they don't even have coverage where they live or where they're pursuing that transaction, then are they being shut out from a part of what is increasingly natural human consumer behaviour? So, I mean, that's revolutionary. It's taken the banks 10 years to get to that point, but it's a big shift. We are evolutionary within a revolutionary cycle, should I say.
And I think that's a great point there to introduce the listeners to Blis, which is a global pioneer in location data. And the company's proprietary technology and platform is helping agencies and brands use location data to ultimately better understand consumer behavior, allowing for effective targeted advertising to actually drive business outcomes. But can I ask that you set the scene and tell listeners a little bit more about the kind of problems that you're solving for your customers, and also what makes you stand out from all those other location data companies out there?
Yes, I can. Thank you for that introduction. That's probably a much better summarisation of our tech and what we do than I could have come up with off the cuff. I might have to take it back a couple of steps if that's possible.
Yeah,
I think historically, or no, I say historically, for decades, everything was viewed through a broadcast media lens, justifiably so, because mass broadcast worked, because mass consumption happened. But in the last 20, 25 years, but particularly in the last 10, the fragmentation of media has meant that the balance of power has shifted away from, I think, media owners historically, who were quite monolithic organisations and who had a very clear, consistent, I suppose, hierarchy of they dictate the content. It is distributed through channels they either own or know very well, to an audience that is largely unchanging. You know, you could present the same information in 1995 as you could in 2005, and there probably wouldn't be much dispute over shares of media spend and viewing figures and so forth. But because smartphone disrupted all that, why not use that same device that blew the market apart? Why don't we use that now to try and understand the people who have adopted that behaviour willingly? And one aspect that comes with the increased penetration, sophistication of smartphone devices is GPS, which is something that has been available previously, but certainly not at the kind of scale we're talking about now through naturally occurring behaviour. And from my point of view, that's what makes it particularly interesting to work in this sector, that we're dealing in natural behaviour without any of the filters that can come through some of the other data sources that are available. So to be more specific, the kind of problems we're serving for our clients is to find that sweet spot between the legacy and the heavy lifting that broadcast media can do and the hyper-targeted precision audiences that digital has become associated with. So because this device that we draw our data from is in the hands of an individual, but can be aggregated into cohorts of hundreds or thousands, tens, hundreds of thousands, millions indeed, in fact, means that it allows us to create a blended or a hybrid model between the broadcast and the targeted the branding and the performance media. And I think as an industry, that is the way we should be going. We have the tools at our disposal to do a better job than we have ever been able to do in the past. And I think top marketers and top advertisers are certainly doing this. And if they're not, they're grappling with it. And we want to help them figure things out as we're figuring them out for ourselves as well.
And location data is a huge hot topic at the moment. So one of the questions I feel I've got to ask, especially because you're right in the heart of this space, is are there any misconceptions or myths around the industry that you can finally rest today, especially when talking about location data?
I'd love to give you a really clear answer to this. And I think it is a category or a sector within the broader industry that has come under a lot of scrutiny lately, particularly in the wake of, or in the build-up and the wake of GDPR. I suppose a popular misconception, and whether it's a misconception or perception, is that it's creepy. I think to an extent, depending, like I say, on your perspective, you might view it as creepy. The reality is that from our perspective, certainly at least, you're not being tracked. And that breaks down into two parts. So the you part is not you we're tracking. We don't know a name. We don't know an address. It is the behavior of a device. So the device is the proxy for the person. And the tracking part is, for the time being at least, we only get visibility of that device when it is being used. Because I think, arguably, the worst case scenario is that you get a better targeted and more relevant ad.
And Blis works with some leading brands in top verticals around the world, including the likes of Samsung, McDonald's, HSBC, Mercedes-Benz and Peugeot, as well as some pretty major advertising agencies throughout the world too. And I understand you cannot give specific examples, but are there any use cases that you could possibly share that will just help listeners visualize the kind of difference that you're making or how those ads appear and what a difference it makes to them?
I mean, the steps where we've made in the last 6 months, so the last 12 months, where we've been refining how we use our data and how we apply this directly to our clients' challenges is, I alluded to this earlier, but the idea of finding a sweet spot between broadcast and hyper-targeting is that we think from a regional perspective. So this is not just our position as a media proposition. This is us as an analytics partner being able to feed into the planning of broader media schedules. Is that if we start to plan, because media can be targeted at a regional level, if we plan at a regional level, what we start to see is that if you have too much of a footing in a broadcast era, then putting out a national message is probably going to be too broad a brushstroke. For a lot of clients, especially if they're looking to create effective media. But equally, hyper-targeting is going to be too niche, and the channels you can hyper-target via, are they going to be impactful enough for the message you want to get across? So by targeting regionally, so taking the UK as an example, if we have 15 TV regions, are you putting yourself in a better position by making 15 empirically justifiable decisions on who your key competitors are than one broad, sweeping definition of who your number one competitor is nationally? Particularly when we understand through our places database that the distribution, not just the volume, but the distribution of your competitors may not be equal across the country. So your number one competitor in one region is not going to be your number one competitor in another, if they're even there at all. So that's one example. We're finding increasing traction with this idea of a kind of a stepping stone between national and individual targeting. We're finding quite a lot of use at the moment in some sectors, certainly not in all, of using footfall, kind of store visit footfall, as a proxy for market share as well. So in quick service restaurants, the fast food industry, where if you're visiting a store, the likelihood is that's going to translate into a transaction. You don't go to any of these restaurants to browse. You're in there to buy. Similarly with grocery retailers. Slightly different for the FMCG or CPG brands that are going to be stocked in those outlets. But then the further along the chain, I suppose, you go, the more big ticket the purchase becomes, the less intrinsically linked we see footfall is to revenue generation. So in the auto sector or the furniture sector, that correlation, which can be kind of 0.8, 0.9 for quick service restaurants and grocery, drops down to more like 0.5, 0.6. So while there is some relationship, what it throws up for us there is, arguably, it's more interesting. It starts to present what your different challenges might be. As a retailer in the auto sector, if you're the owner of a number of dealerships, how strong is your conversion from footfall to sales? And if it's not, do you need to open more dealerships to compensate? And can that prop up your revenue? Or if your conversion is very strong, how can you make more maybe of the online portion of that consumer journey to make sure that when it comes to a dealership visit, it is yours they're going to?
And back in April, I remember reading that Blis research revealed that shopping habits are now becoming increasingly mobile and automated, which nobody's going to be too surprised about. But was there anything in that report that really surprised you?
This is an interesting topic for me. As you say, that statement in itself is probably not surprising. Some things you weren't asking me to kind of challenge or dispute that, because even as someone who is, I suppose, equal parts proud and an equal part disenfranchised of being on the cusp of a millennial, I tend to not be included in the target audience of a lot of briefs. My behaviours are believed to be prehistoric in a lot of ways, but I use my mobile to buy stuff, as crazy as it sounds. I use my mobile to research stuff. Consumer behaviours are becoming more mobile, which is not open for debate. That's not up for dispute. But it's what is the role of mobile in that consumer behaviour? Is it the research phase? Is it checking reviews? Is it price comparison? How much of that happens before you get to the store and how much of it happens in the store? And do you actually complete the transaction online? Or and is online kind of closely synonymous enough with mobile now that we can use the two interchangeably? I'm not sure it is, because a lot of people now with Apple Pay or Google Pay or Android Pay will complete a digital transaction, but it might have had absolutely no precursor to that happening online, let's say.
And if it makes you feel any better, of course, millennials are heading straight to middle age at the moment, and Gen Z are going to be taking all the focus of them. So they're going to know exactly how it feels, aren't they, soon enough?
But yeah, and I think when I dropped that bit in about being on the cusp of a millennial, one of the primary reasons why I will use my mobile or I was going to say or other sources, but it is primarily the mobile. The reason why I use my mobile for this is because it is convenient, because it's the path of least resistance, because other aspects of my life, and I think it's the same for my peers, convenience is the real draw for this. It's not a seduction by the technology. It's what the technology enables us to do. If I can do my weekly shopping in 20 minutes online and wait for it to come to my front door the next day, that is infinitely preferable than dragging a 3-year-old around Sainsbury's who it gets hooked into anything with bright colours and even all stuff she will categorically say when we get home she doesn't like. But maybe that's the power of brands, I don't know.
Well, speaking of which, I also read that 91% of retailers are embracing digital strategies to build loyalty to physical stores and getting people back in those stores. So can you expand on the findings from that and any other trends that you might be seeing?
I don't know. The first point to make on that is who are the 9% who aren't?
Yeah.
And what are they doing? Maybe they're the beacons we should look to as other retailers potentially. For how do they survive? What is it they're doing so right that they don't have to embrace these incoming tides of consumer behaviour? These are things that are happening and we cannot deny it, and we have to embrace it. I think we've had enough stories about death and doom and gloom on the high street that none of this should come as a surprise anymore. But it doesn't have to be about death of the high street and all this like hyperbolic statements like this. It's alerting, if anything, it's alerting us to a shift in behaviour that is happening. And then how long do we wait before that the tone of the story turns towards renaissance and regeneration, a redemption of the high street? I mean, we've lost a lot of businesses along the way, and none of this is good news, like not for the individuals on the receiving end of these problems for sure. But what can those businesses do to change? How can they embrace changing consumer behaviour? For a lot of people, particularly these generations coming through, as you say, a trip to the high street or the shopping mall is a social experience. It's a way to engage with your friends outside of school, college, work, in a way that I think we previously would have taken for granted. But this is your friends don't exist purely in an online or an offline world now, because the two are not exclusive, and they haven't been for a long time.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, especially about the doom and gloom and death and the high street narratives. It's all been done to death, and I think a lot of it is because bad news sells papers and gets clicks, but the good news doesn't. So I always try and promote the more positive side on this podcast. So is there anything else on the road that really does excite you that will create that different narrative?
The couple of things that have really drawn me in, it's a trajectory view of consumer behaviour. So while most of what we do at the moment relies on identifying devices who are seen at a place and then looking which other places over a period of time they're visited, the new direction is to respin that and use the device as the primary seed of information and look back along the chain and use that to predict what might be coming further along the chain. There's been some great work done in the past by esteemed professors from the MIT where they've been as bold as to say 93% of human behaviour is predictable. So if we can understand, I mean, we've already done a little bit of referencing of history in this, but if we can understand where we've come from and where we've come from, where consumers have come from, is that a good source of being able to predict and model where they're going to be going next? But can lookalike audiences be created based on actual behaviour rather than self-reported behaviour, for example?
And for anybody listening that wants to find out more information about the kind of work that you're doing and delve a little bit deeper, or maybe got a few questions after listening to our conversation today, could you just point them in the direction of how to find you online and contact a member of your team?
We have representatives in our London headquarters. So there are a team of us here, and we also have insight representatives in the US, based in New York, and in Australia, based in Sydney. But you can always find us online at blis.com, and there's a contact us page, and by hook or by crook, that will get directed to the relevant person.
Well, thanks so much for coming on today. There's so much exciting things going on in this space at the moment. And I appreciate a lot of the angles that you took here, because I'm a fellow fence sitter myself as well. My wife's always telling me that. I always tell her it's for purpose of debate, but it doesn't seem to silence. But more than anything, just a big thank you for taking the time out of your day to come on and share the stories about location technology and where we're heading with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. I appreciate the opportunity.
I love how Blis is helping businesses understand online real-world audiences and how using location data. And it's also important to highlight that Blis are working with leading brands in top verticals, including the likes of Samsung, McDonald's, HSBC, Mercedes-Benz and Peugeot, as well as some pretty major advertising agencies too. And in an age of real-time personalisation, location data is becoming a huge deal. And I know there are so many different companies setting up in this area. And I find myself wondering, what do you all think about it? Now, just because I'm on holiday, don't think I won't answer your emails and tweets, etc. So please, I want you to keep sending in those messages. And you can email me directly, techblogwriter@outlook.com. You can tweet me at Neil C. Hughes. If you're not interested in asking me questions, you just want to have a little sneak peek of my holiday photos, you can find me on Instagram at Neil C. Hughes too. And also, if you're at work, Remember, you can listen to this podcast on YouTube. Yes, it is just an audio version, but it does allow you to have a separate browser tab open, minimise the browser, work away, and you can still get your Tech Blog Writer podcast fix. There's my little life hack that I'll leave you with. But it's time for me to get back to sunny Croatia now, so I'll return tomorrow with another guest. Hope you're all doing well, and I look forward to hearing from you all. But a big thank you for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thanks for listening to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Until next time, remember, technology is best when it brings people together.